welcome to the virtual book club by Ed Piskor. I want to start off by thanking our virtual hosts, Floating World Comics in Portland, Oregon. They're a super cool shop. We highly encourage you to check them out if you're in the area, or if not, you can visit their web store. If you order a copy of Red Room, the Antisocial Network from them, you can get a book plate signed by Ed while supplies last. I'll drop the link in the comments, so keep an eye out for that. Before we begin, please note, while you can see and hear Ed and Jim, they cannot see or hear you. So if you have questions for the authors, please leave them in the comments, and they'll get to as many as they can during the Q&A portion at the end of the talk. So for the main event, Ed Piskor has been cartooning professionally in print form since 2005, starting off drawing the American Splendor comics written by Harvey Pekar. Since then, he created the best-selling series Hip Hop Family Tree and X-Men Grand Design. He's here today to discuss the first collection of his newest series, Red Room, the Antisocial Network. In this best-selling comic, aided by the anonymous dark web and nearly untraceable cryptocurrency, a criminal subculture has emerged. It live streams murders as entertainment. Who are the killers? Who are the victims? Who is paying to watch? And how to stop it? Red Room is constructed as a series of interconnected stories, shining a light on the characters who exist in the ugliest corners in cyberspace. CBR called it a gory, blood-spattered tour de force, and Fangoria noted, "It is as brutal as you would expect, but lined with humor, satire, and masterful illustrations." Joining Ed today is Jim Rugg, comic book artist, bookmaker, illustrator, and designer, whose books include Street Angel, The Plain Janes, Aphrodisiac, Notebook Drawings, Rambo 3.5, and Super Mag. He's also designed some wildly cool variant covers for the Red Room individual issues, including homages to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 and R. Crumb Zap Zero. Along with Ed, he's the other half of the hugely popular Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube channel, where they discuss comics and graphic novels and interview artists. So let's give them a virtual round of applause, and I'll turn it over to Ed and Jim.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Super cool to meet you. And I apologize profusely that you have to have anything to do with this ridiculous comic of mine.
Ed, that's a great place to start. You know, the purpose of this is to hopefully to introduce some new people to Red Room. And I look at this book and I think, who needs this book is any horror fan, right? Especially with Christmas right around the corner. It's kind of perfect timing for the cool comic, the cool graphic novel to slip to somebody who's interested in comics but loves horror. And I thought we might start there with some of the characters and influences behind Red Room, because when you started telling me about this comic, as Lauren says, you know, it's murder on the dark web. The thing that pops, though, the characters right away are the first thing I think about. When did you figure out, like, these characters have to be costumed, right? They've got to be anonymous. It's kind of like superheroes. It's kind of like slasher movie heroes, if you will. Tell us about the characters and how you started building these characters, and have any surprised you? Any favorites in your character collection?
Jim, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, man. See you in a day or two. We'll do some more. We'll do lunch. The characters in Red Room, the idea of creating these costumes and stuff was sort of came first, right? Because we grew up with superhero comics, right? And it's fun designing that kind of thing. But we always talk about on the channel, man, RC Cola superheroes, right? Like try as you may, you're not going to create a superhero to rival Superman or Batman or Captain America or something like that, but it's still fun to design that stuff. And it started with that idea. If you're going to be doing very, very nefarious things and filming yourself online, you don't even want one piece of skin showing. Like, you don't want to even give that much of a clue to the federales, man, to try to zero in on who you are. So, dude, that was like one of the most fun parts of it. Working on that X-Men Grand Design project for Marvel, and just knowing our creative elders going through that system, creating characters that don't get to be theirs anymore. Why not create some of our own, you know? And a big part of choosing to do Red Room, because, you know, we have like an order of operations, man. I was very impressed by your Kickstarter and how the Cartoonist Kayfabe audience kind of showed up in a giant way. And on my board that's right directly behind the camera, you know which one I'm talking about, giant bulletin board, the biggest one that money can buy. Like, I have a bunch of ideas on there and a bunch of comic book ideas, and I decided, like, let me try the one that I think will be the least commercial, because you know that there will be a built-in segment of people who will never touch this. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know about any other comics that I was working on where you just knew that there will be a chunk of people that aren't going to support this kind of thing. So let me try that odd idea, you know? The sort of 5-year plan was do these hip-hop comics, do X-Men Grand Design, make these things profitable books that can support a weird one. And it just so happens that this weird one is something that a lot of people are showing up for. And you know what, Jimmy, might I say, because this is kind of like breaking news in a way, there was a kind of ransomware attack at Diamond Distributors over the past couple of days.
Do we know if Mistress Pentagram was involved?
You know what? That's the text that I've been coming in, man. Like, I think a Red Rumor did it. Like, all this kind of stuff, right? And final order cutoff for Red Room Trigger Warnings issue number 1 was going to be yesterday. You know, like I was talking with Eric. Hey, man, what are the numbers? What are the numbers? We're extending final order cutoff. So, Jim, you have that Zap Zero cover, man. You know how it works, man. Say a word so that you.
Yeah, I know. I gotta speak up to get my cover up there in front of everybody. But my homage to Robert Crumb, and Ed, thank you for letting me do these variants. They've turned out to be very enjoyable. Thought I was going to do one. They've kind of taken off with these like parody and homage covers. And I always say, you know, this is the way you get to stare at like Robert Crumb or Dan Clowes or Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, whoever it happens to be, but you get to really kind of deep dive into their artwork. And they've been surprises along the way for me, being able to spend a few days with these things and really look at their line work and how they make their work. So here's my variant for Trigger Warnings number 1. And I guess you know, everybody watching at home, you've got 1 extra week now to reserve one of these at your local comic shop.
And you know how that sort of thing goes. Whenever there's a kind of a time limit on something, and that time limit, you know, is finished, then you start getting all the DMs and you start getting all the emails and stuff. How do I get Jim Rugg's cover? How can I do it? What do I do? Like I missed the boat. I missed the window. So I'm here saying that you guys have another week to go to your local comic shop, put in the good word, tell them that you want Red Room Trigger Warnings number 1, tell them which variant cover you want. You know, I did a variant. Jimmy did that Superfly Zap Zero variant, and Peach Momoko, the Cottage Industry of Comic Book Covers 2020-2021. She's got a fly-ass cover, and you got another week to get that in, man. And speaking of, you know, Floating World Fantagraphics, I got a link in the description below this video where people can grab the Red Room book from Floating World, and it's going to come with a signed book plate. I've been signing a whole bunch of them for the shop, and going to send these things over. So you order the comic directly from Floating World, you're going to get a signed book plate, which kind of addresses another kind of set of DMs and emails where people are like, can I send you a self-addressed stamped envelope, send you a comic, you sign it, send it back? Dude, I'm working on a monthly comic, and I just don't have time to be hitting the PO all the time, man. So Jason at Floating World is really helping us out by filling that need.
Yeah, always good to support the local comic shops, or a good comic shop in the case of Floating World that may not be local to everybody watching this stream, but definitely, you know, buy these books from your comic shops if possible. Keep these comic shops open for me. I need them. I would miss them very much if they weren't there, and this is a great way to support them. And again, a signed book plate, perfect for a gift, kind of makes that book a little something special. Ed, you mentioned a monthly book. Whenever you started working on this thing, you know, I've been getting front row seats to it, you know, getting to hear it come together. And one of the coolest features in the book for me is seeing the backup material, the extra stuff, including your first draft, you know, the behind the scenes kind of your writing and process. And I did want to just mention that because so many people do ask questions about process. And one of the nice pieces of this book is not just the comics themselves, but the book that you put together. What's that process like, you know, putting together a book like this? You finish your monthly, you know, 4 issues monthly. Now it's time to sit down and figure out, like, how does this work as a book? I know you spent some time with that, and I think you made a beautiful book. Any surprises along the way of putting this together?
It took a lot more time than I thought it would, because you want to create a different kind of experience than just those single issues. You're addressing two potentially different audiences with some overlap here and there, and you can't just take another bite of the apple, gang up all these books, slap a cover on it, and think that that's going to do the trick. I'm your little brother, man, and I learned it by watching you. Like as that famous PSA says, And I see the toil that you guys have gone through putting your books together, and it's put so many other considerations in my own mind when it comes to packaging books and knowing that the lifespan of the actual book collections is really what's going to stand the test of time more than the pamphlets. Like the actual comic books, they're periodicals, man. Like they might live in the back issues for a minute, but they're on the shelves until the next one comes out pretty much. And the way people have been showing up, certainly thanks to the audience we've built with the YouTube channel and everything, these comics are flying. They're disappearing, and you don't keep those in print. That's not the common wisdom any longer. If this was like Fantagraphics of yore, the direct market of yore, when I got like a, 7th printing of Love and Rockets #1 or something, just ain't that. It's not the model any longer, So if I have to live with this thing being on the shelves, from now until the people we trust with the comics medium completely destroy the business of comics, got to make a book that's fly.
I love that book cover. I saw some retailer had laid out a stack of these and was shooting video of them, and they look wet almost. the cover. I don't know if that's a varnish or what, but man, what a cool design.
Oh, I know. And that red, like when that camera's going by, like you could even see it like that. Like look at that glistening pool of blood, essentially, with that light, right? Yeah, super fun, man.
It's so glossy when you turn it like that. It's just like this white line that goes across the cover as it hits the lights.
Once you start getting into the minutiae of book production, you can really get deep in the weeds, man. I remember like one of my favorite decisions I had to make was when we were doing the first box set for Hip Hop Family Tree, and I did that extra comic with the Rob Liefeld little ash can thing. And you need gold foil if you're going to do a 90s comic, and you need some deboss and emboss. And when Fantagraphics came to me and they were like, Ed, you have to choose between 6 different golds, man. That's when you're in the big time. What
amazing. I feel like the image guys of the early 90s, they had it simpler, Ed. I feel like it was gold or silver. That's all they had to pick.
Or rub the blood.
Yes.
You know what, man? I think that red, like how there's like that kind of like rougher texture on the words. I feel like that might be rub the blood texture.
I was gonna say, man, thermal ink maybe for book 2.
Yeah, I see. Now that's in my head. I have to go when we're done with this conversation. I have to go dig in the box and go look for my Bloodstrike issue.
Go do some research on real book design. Bloodstrike #1.
Dude, how fun was it talking to Mike Mignola, man?
One of the highlights so far, the Cartoonist Kayfabe. But Ed, you talk about digging into books, man. So I was going to ask research, right? You've done extensive research on past books, on hackers, hip hop, even X-Men Grand Design, maybe the most research on X-Men Grand Design. What kind of stuff are you researching for Red Room? What are you looking at, reading, watching? What's been cool? What's kind of surprised you or been exciting to find? And what are you spending your time with?
We've been dusting off that old word, splatterpunk. And that was one of the things that was in the back of my mind, man. And got to thank the audience for hipping me to some writers that weren't on the tip of the tongue, like Jack Ketchum, like Richard Lehman. These are guys who really, in those 1980s, man, they really built careers for themselves in that cheap paperback novel format, And these are blue collar novels, this is the kind of stuff that I always have been chasing, and it's the kind of comics that I wanted to make. Like, yeah, it's cute that comics have been accepted in academic spaces, but by and large, most of the comics that you and I look at on our YouTube channel and stuff, just blue collar workaday people making these things, man. So it's nice that the whackademics are involved, but I wanted to make something that was like, you know, taking comics back to the roots, man, and just indulge in vulgarity a little bit. You're of the same demographic practically, Jimmy. So I know you came up in the mom and pop VHS rental store kind of lifestyle. That's where I come from as well, man. So 8th Avenue and Homestead, I remember getting our first membership card to a movie store, and that's a huge influence on this comic. You know, I'm not chasing Eisner Awards with this thing. I'm chasing just cult classic status, man. Toxic Avenger type shit.
I remember spending a lot of hours in the video stores just going over that box art, like, and of course the horror movies, the best section in the video stores for cool cover art.
We're visual creatures, dude. Like, as cartoonists, as artists, like you're taking in a lot of visual data, and the lewdness and vulgarity of VHS, you know, horror sections in the mom and pop shops. And I say that very specifically because I stepped foot in a Blockbuster 1 or 2 times. We actually didn't really have them around here that much. But when you get those corporate joints, you know, the Hollywood Video or whatever, they sanitize that shit, man. And I'm talking about, like, you know, West Coast Video. The joint that I worked at was called Hollywood Video, but it wasn't the big corporate joint. And they would have to make these decisions, like, should we order El Topo for $400? Like, could we get enough people to rent this thing to justify the $400 cost of El Topo? Because it wasn't like a mass-produced thing, you know, and that was the way shit worked back then. And they would make those decisions, you know, like they wouldn't get the Garbage Pail Kids flick for me, but I don't hold it against them. I saw it eventually.
Man, all those video stores popped up whenever I was growing up, and it'd be like you'd have to buy your memberships, and there'd be monthlies or yearly or lifetime. I don't know how many lifetime memberships I had. I can tell you none of those video stores, of course, are open anymore. Probably none of them lasted 10 years from the time I got a membership. But I did see Garbage Pail Kids from one of them, so kind of works out.
There's all this, like, culture that's lost from that. Like, I remember that's like where you would rent your you would rent a Nintendo before you would buy it. You know, like if you were in my neighborhood, if you were anybody I knew, you rented that thing before you bought the thing. And honestly, that is a little bit of an influence on the comic as well, because what are video games from that era? Certainly, if not, you know, mindless violence for the most part.
Man, mindless violence brings back Scott McCloud memories for me.
Yeah.
Senseless violence.
Mortal Kombat fatalities, man. Like that's what I'm drawing in this fucking comic.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't play a lot of video games, but of course I've played some in Mortal Kombat. Of course, everybody I think is familiar with. It's interesting. I don't think about video games the way I do comics, but of course there was uproars about violence in video games. You know, probably a lot more in our lifetime than anything in comics.
You know what I just scooped up? I just got it today, in fact, man, because, you know, you got to reward yourself for good behavior. I have a book that just hit the stands. Got to reward myself for good behavior. And I ordered this thing. It's called the Mega EverDrive Pro. And you load up an SD card to put it into a blank Genesis cartridge, right? You put an SD card in there, and it could play every Sega Master System game, every Genesis Sega game, and Sega CD. And I never had a Sega CD. And when I was a little kid, when all that uproar from the government really started happening with video games, it was Mortal Kombat, and there was a Sega CD game called Night Trap. It was this flick that was shot in the mid-'80s where Dana Plato is playing like the main character, and it's like these sorority chicks are in this mansion, and you're working a control panel, and you have cameras in every single room, and there are these like invaders, and you have to set up traps to like kill the invaders, and it's all full motion video. And there were scenes that really made Joe Lieberman feel some type of way, man. So like, that stuff is an inspiration for this comic. And after I get off this stream, I'm gonna play Night Trap for the first time in my life.
Man, that's pretty exciting. I feel like I got to get these questions rolling faster and faster. Get you off the hot seat and in front of your game system. One piece I got to ask you about, and that's the look of Red Room. It's totally, I mean, in this day and age, I feel like it's totally unique. Your comics are very distinct looking, but each one looks different than the previous one. Red Room, very different than X-Men Grand Design. Can you talk about the origins of that? Like, we know where that's coming from. Can you talk about some of, the Outlaw Comics legacy, the black and white stuff? Like, how's that come together? How'd you even choose to do black and white?
Yeah, man. It's that old Wayne Gretzky adage, man. Like, don't go where the puck has been, go where it's going. And I'm sitting here, in my little drawing chair, in my little studio, and I'm seeing what everybody's doing out there. And I see my creative brethren chasing that young adult book advance money and doing like kind of sanitized comics to try to, appeal to, whoever that is, man. Because they say young adult, but they're really talking like young girl or something. Because like, I was a young adult once, and I wouldn't be reading any of that shit, but I would be reading this. So like, I consider this like my young adult comic in a way, man, because this is the kind of shit that I was checking out when I was a little dude, looking at Faust comics, looking at The Crow, marveling at that weird use of parallel lines, man, to achieve these grays. And how do these maniacs do that? Do they sit the T-square on the page and mark off every other millimeter to like make a straight line to achieve those grays? And then, discovering that it's actually a chemical process and a special kind of paper called duotone. Getting a hold and some access to that material, used it a little bit in the Kubert School. Love the aesthetic. Nobody's doing it. Everybody's over here chasing one thing. So I'll just fill a little bit of a void over here by once again indulging in vulgarity. And that comes with the art style, man. Like that mechanical gray and that kind of scratchy black and white, it ain't supposed to be that pleasing to the eyes, man. Like you're chasing a very particular kind of kink if you're going towards those kinds of comics. And it was fun seeing that people are showing up for it, dude. I gotta thank you in such a big way, man, for goosing the numbers with your super cool variant covers and stuff, dude. Because the fact that there are like, dude, there's like over like 250,000 freaking Red Room comics out there. Like, I would have been happy with a fraction of that.
It's been interesting to see people respond to that look, that black and white look, because when we were kids, the story was you can't sell a black and white comic,
right?
And now it's like, of course you can. Like, I think manga completely changed that. Even Frank Miller, whenever we were coming up and started doing Sin City, it seemed like that opened that door to black and white. But now I don't think there's a stigma against it. And yet there's still this hidden history of like black and white comics from the 80s. And I feel like Red Room taps into that in a way that it celebrates that legacy.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not going to lie, man. It's fun even putting Fantagraphics in a position like to compete when you see those top hundreds, man, and to see Red Room up there, like Uncle Gary, man, really pushing for comics as art and stuff like this. And I mean, we are the hash that we're slanging, like the door-to-door vacuum salesman shtick that we're performing here today is for a book with like a disemboweled dude on the cover. Whenever I was telling Gary about this idea, man, we're in line for the elevator back up to our respective hotel rooms at SPX one year, And he's like, Ed, what are these like weird images like on your Facebook? It's some of your best drawing. And I described what the comic was, and he was like, what's the point? And I'm like, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The point doesn't matter, man. You know, like Fantagraphics are publishing tongue-in-cheek horror stories with the EC collections that they're doing. You know, let's do some modern day versions of that. You know, that's sort of the ultimate pitch that I sort of dropped on them whenever I was describing what the comic is. Modern day horrors, man. Let me think about some things that I haven't seen explored really in pop culture that much that exist right now. And that dark web sounds pretty scary.
Yeah, it's great to hear you link the EC Comics to that. Can you talk about your first encounter with EC Comics? Like, did they make much of an impression on you when you got hold of some of those?
Oh, you know it, man. You know the story. Like, whenever Tales from the Crypt, the HBO TV show, was first on, first off, that was super influential. I knew about that before I knew about the fact that it was a comic book. And to see those very lurid covers on every episode, you know, I forget who, Mike Vosberg, I think, drew a lot of those things. And I was attracted to that kind of imagery. You know, I was reading comics like crazy. So they start to, I think Russ Cochran was able to get straight up newsstand distribution in the early 90s, man, for those 64 pagers where they would reprint 2 issues of stuff. They would give you a really lurid, crazy cover for one of the horrors. You know, they would reprint a horror up front, and then at the centerfold, it would begin another issue of like weird science or crime suspense stories or something. But man, when I got a hold of those comics, dude, it blew my freaking mind because first off, it actually made me think I wasn't going to be able to get to draw comics because the art in that was so much more advanced than what the house style was at, you know, Marvel or DC circa 1989, 1990. So, and I recognized that it was very advanced artwork. I remember trying to like copy some Wally Wood. You know, there was a strip called The Exile or something. And it was just simple, like bald-headed space traveler dudes. And it's just like, this is a perfect, like one line out of place, you screw up the whole thing. And I'm like, man, I don't even think I'm going to be able to get to draw comics when I grow up. This is like way too hard. But yeah, dude, those EC comics, you know, particularly that one Haunt of Fear issue that ended with, it was a story of some domestic violence, some wife beater, husband guy, drunk, asshole, you know, beats this lady up for 6 pages. And then when you describe this stuff, it's like, was Frederick Wortham right? You know, like little kids in 1954 reading this shit. So then like the last page, you know, he has a bender or something and is drunk and goes to sleep. And when he wakes up, you know, he can't move his arms and he's on some kind of like stretch rack and his wife is like cranking the rack and just pulling his arms and legs off his body. And I legitimately went to the magazine rack almost every time Mom went to the grocery store because I needed to see the next issue because I wanted to see how that story would resolve itself because I didn't realize like Marvel Comics and DC Comics don't end that way. You know, they end with a cliffhanger, you know, they end with somebody in a perilous situation, but then when you get the next issue, they get out of that jam and get put into another jam. That's the bait and switch of the corporate comics. And then when I got that next issue, dude, and there wasn't even one mention of that couple, that effed my head up for years. I mean, I'm still talking about it. I'm 39 years old. I probably saw it when I was 8.
Were those some of the first like horror comics that you came across?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, man. Because like what else would have even been on a Shop and Save rack, man? Like even shit like Moon Knight or something was a direct market book. And there wasn't Ghost Rider yet.
Man, it's funny to think of like Moon Knight as like some quasi horror comic or Ghost Rider being like that would be your horror comic if all you had were newsstands in the early 90s.
Yeah, think about it. Like what would the horror stuff be? Like I can't even think of one thing really.
Yeah, I'm with you. They kind of go out of at least off the newsstand, they kind of go away. And it
Right.
was just superheroes whenever early 90s, late 80s newsstand. Seems like that's all it was, Batman and Marvel. Um, Marvel question for you. Chuck asks, are you finished with the Grand Design series for Marvel? Are there any more stories you'd like to revisit?
Yeah, I think I'm good. Like the strategy with even doing anything with Marvel for me was just because recognizing that the hip hop books were extremely successful in stores outside of comic shops. Knowing that I wanted to make some comic books, I wanted to make comics like Red Room. The Grand Design comics were like that's like my handshake to the direct market, just so that the comic shop retailers could have a little confidence in me when they see the name. You know what I'm saying, man? Try something that's evergreen, at least to me, like classic X-Men. That shit is evergreen, and whoever thought we would live in a world where Avengers is better known than X-Men? Like when we were kids in the 90s, that would have been crazy. Like nobody was reading Avengers comics. And whenever Axel Alonso called my bluff and was like, what kind of X-Men comic you want to do? I didn't have anything in mind. So let me spend what I thought was going to be 1 year doing some fan art. You know what I'm saying, man? Let me draw a couple pages of the classic X-Men with the blue and yellow. Let me draw a cool Magneto. Let me draw the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, man. I'll try some Sabretooth. Like that's what it was. And we put it out there. That turned out to be super successful, man. I think, like thanks to that book, accumulated so many more followers on like Instagram. My like that bumps up your social media presence a whole lot, man, when you have like a popular kind of direct market kind of comic. And then the tried and true business model that I've always seen in the past 20 years is do a little something something Marvel DC and then go do your own thing, man, and sell to a percentage of that audience that you introduced yourself to. So that was the plan. I did it. I accomplished it. Working in the strictures of corporate comics, it's not really for a cartoonist to do. Like, you got people who write but can't draw. You got people who draw but don't want to write. Like, let them have it. The Keebler Elf system.
The assembly line. Were you thinking Red Room while you were working on X-Men? Was that idea like developing while you're working on this other book?
For sure, dude. I was selling publishers on the idea when I was working on my last Hip Hop Family Tree. I was gonna finish Volume 4 and just get busy with Red Room, sort of right away. Several publishers were interested. And getting the opportunity to do the Marvel thing and to do like exactly what I want. Books, the collection's got to be the same size as my hip hop books. I have to be able to promote it a certain way. I don't want glossy paper on the issues. I want a certain price, page rate. And when they just say yes to all of it, it's like, you motherfuckers, man. Now I have to do it. And I don't know about you.
I was going to say, man, when they keep saying yes, it's almost like all the horror stories you've heard about Marvel. What are people talking about? Sounds like a good deal.
Yeah, I have to say, man, like I don't have any. I came through it unscathed, man. Like mutually good business. Like they knowing the deal, the sort of pimp and hoe situation, like mutually good business. Like I used them for what I needed to. They used me for what they needed to, and we came out. It was a wash in the end, with the added benefit of being able to pay a bunch of bills over the foreseeable future to indulge in like trying out a weird comic, because that's sort of, I don't have any help, man. Like I'm not married to anybody. Like I don't have any trust fund or any shit like that, man. Like I gotta carry all the weight in my little situation here, man. So it's like, let me have some profitable books handle that burden so that I can be creative, man, and just do my whimsy. And with that in mind, like, let me try a weird one and see if that can float. I also wanted to test the kayfabe waters, man, and see if the audience would show up to a weird one also. Like whenever I floated the idea of Cartoonist Kayfabe to you and stuff, dude, it was partly something I wanted to build like for Red Room specifically, man, because I knew that I was going to need all the help I could get to just get the word out. Because, I mean, look at the cover of this comic. You know what I'm saying, dude? It's a weird freaking comic. So, like, I needed some sort of platform to shout from, to just, like, let people know that it exists. You know what I'm saying, man? So once again, thanks for joining me on this endeavor, dude, and building this little platform for us. Because once again, as the comics industry becomes whatever it becomes around us, you and I have this very solid network that we're building bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is going to be able to support our weird ideas, like Octobriana was the first one out of the gate, and that bore mad fruit. So I had to try one, like let me do something, off the ranch and see how that works, man. And the kayfabe audience supported this in a giant way. The world is our oyster, homeboy.
Yeah, I've been impressed time and time again by comic book fans. I often use the illustration of I would do little detail things in books that I've done in the past to entertain myself. And frequently those things that I think no one's going to notice are what everybody brings up at signings. And, it's one more example of comic fans impress me. Same with comic retailers. I feel like we lump them together. And by we, I mean everybody, the world at large, lumps comic retailers together as like comic book shops. But it's really a bunch of entrepreneurs that are sort of doing their own thing. And I give a lot of credit to those guys. I feel like that's a smart group of really independent businessmen. So, if you build it, they'll come, I guess, Ed, is my takeaway from this experience so far. Because I do think there are people that, obviously are passionate about comics, and it's a matter of like helping them find the stuff.
Jason at Floating World is one of the good ones too. That's why I sort of agreed to even like participate in this right here, man. And once again, like the link is in the description. Click that, get the book plate signed from me, straight from Jason. You're helping out a really cool comic shop / publisher, because Jason is like one of the most exciting publishers to come up in the past 15-20 years, and it is that entrepreneurial spirit. One of my favorite things about comic shops is checking out new places, and you could almost kind of like come up with some good guesses. You could almost profile the proprietor in a certain way, because you're kind of seeing how his brain or her brain works with their curation process, with how they lay things out. You could look at a comic shop owner's comic shop and imagine what their computer desktop looks like. You know what I'm saying?
That's hilarious. I'll say this, man. I've never been in two comic book shops that are quite the same. Like there's certainly a lot of variation, a lot of room for expression in how comic shop owners run their businesses.
Yeah, for sure.
Another question from I assume the Kayfabers out there. Marv asks, did pro wrestling have influence? Donna Butcher would make a great one.
It does have a place in Red Room, because the characters have gimmicks. The characters have personas. You gotta sell your work in a way, and that's what wrestling is about. It's a carny subculture. Red Room culture is like a super dark kind of carny subculture. So there's definitely like some pro wrestling tangential spirit in the comic. That's for sure.
I don't know if you've ever talked about this on Kayfabe, Ed, but you've told me stories about like you guys used to go see hardcore wrestling matches.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. Like, this mean nothing to anybody, but in what we call Versailles, what anybody outside of the town would call Versailles, there was a mall that would have these wrestling matches in the back of a candy store, dude. Like literally, when these dudes jump off the top rope, they might kick up some acoustic tile from the ceiling. You know what I'm saying? It was a low hanging ceiling with all this kind of shit happening. And they would bring in a giant audience. You know, it would be hundreds of people packed into this place, and it would bring in enough ticket money to have like Shane Douglas come through, or to have New Jack come through.
Man, you know he's doing hardcore shit.
Dude, like, I mean, these people are bleeding on you and things. So, like, one of the things that they were promoting for a while and that we really responded to was weapons matches, and, like, the crowd brings the weapons, man. So, so for, like, when they would announce it the previous show, and now you have 7 days to, keep your eyes peeled whenever you're rolling out with your friends, man, and you see people got the trash on the side of the road, and you see some old light tubes or a VCR. We would always end up the way that that week would transpire. It would begin with stealing a shopping cart. Like just putting a shopping cart on my homeboy's van. So like that's coming for sure. And then just over the week, man, filling it up with stuff, dude. I see a loose road sign over here. That's going in there. We found a big ass bamboo stick, all kinds of those light tube things. I had nunchucks, and it sounds cooler than it is because like you show up with all your stuff, right? And then they take it. And what happens is they gimmick it, dude. So they put like they put little scores into things, man, so that it explodes on impact, or it looks good for the show, we'll say, man. But I remember the very first one when I let them like use my nunchucks, I was like having anxiety attacks. I'm like, yo, I want those back. I thought I was gonna get to hold my nunchucks and like hand them off to a dude. You know what I'm saying, man? I'm like, no, I need my nunchucks back. I've had them things for like 10 years.
See, that's how it would work if it was a babyface that took the nunchucks. Babyface take the nunchucks, use them, and then give them back to the fan.
Yeah, right. But, this is some hillbilly-ass Western PA toothless shit, dude. So what I'm saying is there's no baby faces. Like, even the guys who are supposed to be the baby faces, they would be promoting, like, should I hit this lady in the face? To like some diva or, some, like, ring chick or whatever. Should I smack her in the face? And then all the hillbillies are like, yeah, do it. So like that's the good guy, who's getting the crowd spicy for like man on woman violence.
So there you go, Marv. I feel like you're right. Donna Butcher would make a great one. Would fit right into that. And you mentioned VCRs as a weapon. I gotta hold up this one page because one of the conventions in a lot of comics, like Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns or Howard Chaykin American Flag, is the TV screen or the monitor. And whenever you did a series of these that showed like old TVs for the footage of old Red Room tapes, man, I love that stuff. Real close, near and dear to my heart on that one. Just a detail that stood out to me.
Yeah, me too, man. Like you think about like those classic, TV shaped panels in old comics and how anachronistic they are. Like they just don't matter. What's the point of doing that now? And then what is it now? What's the modern day version? An iPhone shape panel or something? It doesn't have the gravitas of the TV screen, man.
No, it's now the 9-panel grid is kind of your perfect iPhone screen shape.
Yeah, that's true.
Acid Brat asks, will we get an original Jim story art for the Red Room? I actually have one in mind. No plans to do it anytime soon. Keeping me busy with these variant covers, but have people approached you, Ed, of like other writers or other comic pros approached you about doing Red Room stories? Because you've kind of created this arena.
They have, man. On both sets, man. Right, writers and artists, and I do like the idea of there being a universe. We did that Mike Mignola shoot interview, right? And he's got the Hellboy universe. There could be a Red Room universe. Like I'm creating something. The main Red Room comic is going to have a lot of fresh ideas, and I could go a million places with all those ideas, And if the right situation comes along, I was actually talking with my lawyer about how that stuff works to just prevent any Neil Gaiman, Todd McFarlane gimmicks happening, And it does sound complicated, but not unattainable. You know, Mignola clearly figured that out. But so it's possible, but it's not at the front of my thoughts. Like I still got a bunch of issues to do. You know, isn't it weird how these books are kind of our past in a way? Like by the time that they hit the stands, right? Like this book is my COVID lockdown time, essentially. You know, this is my 2020 that's being sold right now, and I'm just like 25 pages away from finishing the next collection.
Yeah, I thought about that coming into tonight. You know, we're showing off like my Zap cover for the next Trigger Warnings issue, but I'm actually drawing a cover for the issue after that. It is weird. Like time is so displaced when it comes to comic books and promotion. And I mean, you know, Red Room Collection is the perfect example. I'm not sure when you finished that, but I know you were working on it, you know, months ago, adding a lot of the new art and stuff for that. I remember watching that process, and it is funny how these things, you know, your head's in a different place whenever it's time to like stand up and talk about this book.
It is going to be fun to just see how the trajectory plays out, because the way these collections are going to be released, it is the same trajectory as Hip Hop Family Tree. And already Red Room is more popular than Hip Hop Family Tree is, you know, already. And it's only a couple months old, really. But the first volume of Hip Hop came out, and then the second volume came out just 7 months later. And that's basically how this stuff is going to work. The second book collection comes out, you know, early summer.
Yeah, the schedule that you're keeping is terrifying to me. The idea of doing a monthly book, you know, working at the rate that you're working at, it's kind of one of those things. It's a bucket list item for me, and I feel like I'm just too old to take that on. Like watching you do that has been pretty impressive.
It's not really monthly, you know, like I spent a lot of time building a queue of issues so that was possible. And I'm going to be able to maintain this schedule over the course of the next 4 issues, you know, like the next season of Red Room, the complete Trigger Warnings scenario. In order to stay on track, I'm working every single day until you and I go to the freaking tropics to go kick it at Maui Comic-Con. And then when I get back, I have to work my butt off to make sure that I stay on that schedule. But once these next 4 issues lapse, it's going to be some time before the last 4 show up, because I just caught up, you know. It takes a long time. This is not... I went into this comic with the idea of like, let me do a monthly comic. But then it was after our Todd McFarlane conversation, really, where he really sold me on the idea of monthly comics. And it changed my whole approach, where, you know, that first issue was 2 issues. I was going to do like 4 issues that would encapsulate the story of that one character. And that would have been like the first trade paperback, would be the complete arc of that character. And there was just something about that conversation, and it made me think about his career, Todd McFarlane. And that's not what the comics were that made him famous. You know, they were these like, you know, satisfying or not satisfying, depending on your taste.
Right.
22-page comics. Like, let me do a bunch of those. You know, let me do a bunch of those things. But this is not the comic to do monthly, because the way I'm designing it is I'm building new characters in every issue, which means you have to come up with a whole new set of stakes and a whole new set of personalities and reasons for why this person or that person is even evolving themselves in this idea of Red Rooms. And that's just a lot of extra work that isn't required when you're just dealing with Peter Parker every 22 pages. So I'm not counting this as my monthly comic, really. So I still have to do one, you know? And maybe my next one will be that.
Yeah, it's nearly impossible, I think, to do a monthly comic, especially if you're doing everything.
Yeah.
Whenever you tack on that it's not really the same set of characters from issue to issue, or, you know, one big story that you've kind of mapped out, and now it's a matter of sitting down and drawing it. It just gets to be too much. You know, like these are like graphic novellas or something where each issue is its own story. It's a lot to put into. It's a lot to build for each issue.
These are Jim Shooter era comics, man. Every issue somebody's first issue. So I want to build a complete comic for somebody who might just randomly find an issue of Red Room, you know, and make them excited enough to want to try to check out another one. You know, that's all I'm asking, man. Give it a shot. If you like it, grab another one.
Yeah, that's something I always love with indie comics. Like, I'm pretty sure everything I've made is standalone. And it's because I like indie comics, and you'd hear about a good series and go to the store and they'd have like issue 4 and it'd be part of a big story. And it would just be like, that's just not the way to go. Like, you need to figure it out. Like, if issue 4 is all that's available, make it pay off, like make it worthwhile. You know, something that you've done in each of these Red Room issues so far. And really, like, to me, I wish more comic book creators would do it that way. If you're going to make comic books, like, make them satisfying. You know, give me my money's worth for one issue that I buy to see if I want to buy more.
The cool thing about connecting with you, connecting with Tom, and just kind of sharing energy over the past like 20 years, the big takeaway for me is like it's not just it's not complaining. Like, we identify things that we don't like about this game, and then rather than just like tweet about it and find other like miserable people to like, you know, pile on and join in that, it's just like, make the thing that you want. You know, if you want more comics that are the satisfying, you know, single issues, then maybe make a couple. And if you get it to be popular enough, you know the followers will come and start doing the same thing. You know, like, that'll start happening with like the corporate stuff or something. So that was the goal, you know, like, I'm always playing around with this business because like nothing about the business of comics impresses me. So when it came time to like do a little something for Marvel, my thought was like, all right, let's have an actual Marvel comic done by one person. Let's see what that looks like. And let's get them to break format. You know, let's get them to break that standard, you know, book format that they've just kept forever. So like, I did that, you know what I'm saying? And paying more attention to like monthly comics and things when I was doing the X-Men stuff, and just realizing like, oh, these are like, they were definitely not satisfying in like the 2000s. And they're even less so now, man, because an issue of comics is giving you nothing. Like, even if you read a chapter of manga that's like a 17-page thing that's going to like have a corresponding chapter, you know, next week, those little 17-page things that can be read in 5 minutes are more satisfying, right? So it's like, let me try to make just like a nice, fun 22-page comic that you get in, you get out, very low barrier to entry in terms of like reading experience, meaning you don't have to invest, you know, $12 or $20 in previous issues to like get what I'm trying to sell you on this issue. Get in, get out. You want another one? Go ahead, man. Like, this is a no hard sell zone.
Ed, we're getting near the end of this hour. And first, I'd like to say, you know, plug Floating World Comics once again, where if you buy Red Room there, you get a signed book plate. Again, great for gifts, great to support a very good comic book shop, especially if there's not a comic shop in your area. So I think those links are probably below this video. The other thing is, let's hit up, we only have a couple more questions we didn't get to. Let me run through them as a speed round.
Do it.
All right. Couple guys, Chuck and Donnie asks, well, no, James and Donnie ask, any chance of you two coming down to Australia for a con run, and any dates scheduled for the mainland next year? So a couple of guys interested in where else we're going to comic book conventions besides Hawaii in December. You have anything on your schedule?
I mean, just some stuff came by today, but I'm just not thinking about that right now because I have to try to figure out how to wedge in enough time to get this fourth issue of Trigger Warnings done with this Hawaiian trip that will also turn into a little bit of a vacation. So early on, like, I'm not thinking about any of that. Australia, dude, I'd go to Australia. How about you?
Absolutely. I feel like we were talking to somebody in Australia before COVID became a thing. So I would love to get to Australia. I've never been there. As far as shows go, we certainly promote them. So, as we get as we sign up for any shows or conventions, follow us on social media, follow us on Cartoonist Kayfabe. Any shows we do, we will let everybody know.
It was fun. We had a real run going before COVID where, like, we went to Kansas City or something. Like we went to a lot of places. Nova Scotia.
Yeah, Strange Adventures in Nova Scotia was a fun trip. Good food there.
Shouts to Steve McNiven, man. He took us to get that Don Air that I was reading
Yes.
about, man. Some Nova Scotia specific grubs, man. But we had such a good run right before like COVID and all that stuff happened, and it'll probably pick up again. Jim, what are you working? You want to tell the people what you're working on, man? So that like whenever the word is out on the streets, man, like we could pound the pavement. No?
Yeah,
No, you're not
and
gonna say?
I can't wait to tell the people what I'm working on, but we'll wait just a little bit longer for that. Avanish asks, would you consider giving film or series rights of Red Room to anybody? Squid Game has set the ball rolling. Tom
Yeah.
Savini did a short recently.
Yeah, that shit was really, really cool, man. Got hit up by that studio. Like, we put the video on the Kayfabe channel. People could check it out there. Like, it's been linked on Fangoria. It's definitely making the rounds. And to see the characters realized, like, part of designing the Red Room characters was like, I want something that just the average person could just slap together, because I want to see a million poker faces at the next comic convention that I'm going to. I saw a bunch of people with Halloween costumes that were like, this poker face character seems to be the breakout so far of all the characters I designed, man. And like, I'm definitely not chasing any kind of like Hollywood or Netflix kind of thing. They got to romance me, because I'm not like just signing my stuff away, letting it languish, or having it, given to some schmuck to direct or something. Like, it has to be fly as hell. And the way that they would do that is you basically got to make me fucking rich, man. Because if you're gonna abuse my property in some way, like, you better set me up for a good long time.
Man, words to live by for any aspiring cartoonist out there.
Well, it was, just like I was talking about, like the young adult chasers and shit like that. Like, you got the Netflix chasers that are in the game, and their comics are corny because that they don't care about comics. Like, they probably had some kind of pitch that was floating around Hollywood that just was getting no legs. They see that this Marvel shit is hitting, and then stuff like, Grendel and Sweet Tooth and stuff are like getting adaptations and things. So it's like that's a part of a gross subsection of our business or industry. So that's the other thing. Like, I ain't even chasing that shit. So you got to kiss my behind deeply in order for this to translate into something else, man, because I don't even care about that. Like, I want to make Superfly comics, and if I sign off on that stuff, it's just because it'll be nice to have a commercial to sell more comics, so that I can keep making comics without worrying about a thing.
Makes sense to me. Jacoby asks, did Ed watch Faces of Death videos?
Hey, Jim, did you ever see them things?
I did see them, Ed, and they really bothered me.
I definitely saw them as well. Like, the Piscor house growing up was the house that you would come to see Faces of Death, to play Mortal Kombat, to watch Beavis and Butthead. Like, my parents just, like, they just didn't give a shit about any of that stuff, man. It was like no censorship. And obviously it's like, there is a limit. There's stuff that you can't even like test the folks with or something like that. But like Faces of Death, like, first off, that shit is fake. Like, the stuff that's real is like stuff that you would see on the news anyhow. Like, if you go back and rewatch that stuff, you'll feel real dumb when you're like, hold up, how is the camera point of view inside of a bear's mouth? How does that happen?
I remember one that bothered me was a guy had been run over by like a commuter train.
Oh, yeah.
And like the top part of him was on the platform and the train was on him. And the deal was, once the train moved, he was going to die like instantly.
Yeah.
And
I
remember didn't care for that one.
Yeah, that's the you get twisted around so much, your bottom half, that it creates the tourniquet that when you unravel it, you're done. You spill out, man.
Yeah, no, thank you. And last one I see here, Sean asks, will we ever see a kayfabe creator book swap such as Image did in the early days? Ed doing Street Angel and Jim doing Red Room. I'm ready. I doubt it, but I would like to see an Ed Street Angel comic. I would sign up to read that one. I'll tell you that.
So you're saying you're not going to draw any gore?
You know what? Maybe this could work, Ed.
Well, you know what, dude? Like, it might not be these projects, but we were talking about some future stuff. You know, like I do a thing, you do a thing. You know, there's a intercompany crossover. But that's some year away, 2 years away.
Very true. It does take time to produce these things, but we are here, I guess, at the end, right after 9. So once again, hit up the links below to pick up your copy of Red Room with a signed bookplate from Floating World Comics, or from Fantagraphics, or from your local comic shop. Wherever books are sold, you can find Red Room. And Ed, where else should they look for you?
Man, you know that Cartoonist Kayfabe channel is the home base. And you know what, man? We put the clocks back 1 hour a day or two ago. So my body feels like it's 10 p.m. And old Uncle Eddie has become a grandpap recently, I feel like, man. And it's almost past my bedtime. So we should close things out. I want to thank Fantagraphics for creating the platform. I want to thank Jason at Floating World for being one of the raddest comic shops in the country, and having sort of like the progressive mindset to even like want to do this kind of thing. Have these book plates. Like, not every store like hit us up to try to work something like that out. So that's super fly. Jimmy, I want to thank you for your partnership on this Cartoonist Kayfabe thing and helping me build a platform so that we could take care of ourselves, man, in a world where comics is a dicey game, and this provides some stability for us. Want to thank the audience out there, man, and I hope everybody has a good night.
Yeah, and I will just add, read more comics.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna end that stream. Super cool.